Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Agency Journey. My guest today on the call is Hector Santiesteban, founder at Amplafy Media. Hector, how are you doing today?
I am excited to be chatting with you on a Friday.
Oh,
After
yes.
I couldn't think of a better way to do it.
Yes, this is basically the last thing I've got on the
Th-
agenda for the week, and this is also my most favorite thing to do is to interview cool people. So I'm really glad we get to have this
This is
conversation.
our second or third conversation recording, and I don't know if I've always tried to be professional and call you Yaku, but can I officially ask to call you Kuba? Are we there yet?
Yes, you
Can
can.
I?
That is actually
Okay,
preferred.
great,
So Kuba
great,
is
great. I didn't
okay.
want to step on any toes, so
No,
great. It's
no.
great to be with you, Kuba.
Your inner circle, Hector. No problem at all. Alrighty. And we can share a little bit of the context behind us, maybe a little bit later in the episode. A lot of people are going to be meeting you through this episode for the first time. And first, I want them to meet your fun side. So let me ask you a question to start this conversation. I love it because it always makes me smile. Always kind of puts me in a place that I don't expect. Hector, what is the most fun thing you've done this year thus far?
The most fun thing I've done is I have a 4 and a 5-year-old, and
Mm.
we live about an hour away from the Legoland here in Southern California,
Mm.
and seeing them, go and do that has been a joy for me. So I'd say that.
Okay. Well, do they have some favorite sets of Legos or favorite themes?
Yeah. My son is really into like the Ninjago
Oh.
thing, and so there's this this they call it spinjitzu, and he's we got him into like wrestling and jujitsu as well, and so
Oh.
he's like he's kind of getting into his ninja sort of phase, which is cool to see.
Yeah, Ninjago. I mean, I'm aware of the theme of the brand, although my thing used to be when I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12. Me and my brother were super into Bionicle and like a check on the
Yeah,
audience. Like,
there's
do you remember Bionicle?
I was it was a little behind
Oh,
me, but they still have them at the parks, and so we've got pictures with the Bionicles,
are you
and so
serious?
it's
Oh,
cool. Yeah, they're
I
awesome.
I think I would faint if I saw that. Yeah, that was my jam. And if anybody listening knows Bionicle, then yeah, you're my close friend officially. Starting from right now. Awesome, awesome, Hector. We've got a nice conversation lined up here on Agency Journey today. I'm going to ask you about you, your agency, your context in just a second here. But what I like to do on Agency Journey is to deliver some value right from the very start before we get deeper into the conversation. So I'm going to ask you the standard traditional agency journey question. Hector, what is your number one tip for agency operators?
The thing that I've found is important for them is to sell the benefits and not the features. And that sounds simple, but
Mm.
when I was in my very first job out of high school was a sales job, and we were selling like houseware, and people would get really excited about the rivets and the materials and the things that it was made out of and how it was made, and the customer would just stare blankly back at
Mm.
us because they cared how it helped them in their house and in their kitchen. And similarly, I think that, and I know I've been guilty of it, but as agency owners, we focus on how we're doing things or what we're doing. We're focusing on our unique capabilities or our unique processes, which is great because it gets the result. But I think that focusing on that result is much more impactful. It's much more powerful. It resonates more with people because they don't a lot of clients don't really care how the sausage is made,
Right.
frankly. They
Right.
just they want the end result. They want to have a good they want to have a good sausage in front of them. To extend that analogy.
Okay, understood. So you're talking about focusing on benefits, not features. I'm curious. Obviously, there's a range of benefits. There's a range of problems that any agency solves. Do you have a frame for like which benefits to talk about when you have little information about kind of who you've got on the call, like how to get a feel for that?
Well, I think that there's always some sort of outcomes that our clients are looking for,
Hmm.
right? There's something in their head, and usually for agencies there tends to be like kind of buckets of clients. This person really is looking for this, but the service is the same, but their desires are the same. I mean, we have a podcast company, and so it's like for some people, they really are into the thought leadership, and so they really want to be this expert, and they want to have this prestige and this esteem, and frankly, how many clients they get directly from the show is less important to them. And we have other people who they really want to drive revenue and clients, and they want to use the show as a pipeline for their show. And for them, it's the same processes. I mean, we may tweak or emphasize certain things on the back end of our fulfillment, but generally, I'm trying to figure out what bucket are they in, and then and I'll do that through questions or asking them, getting an idea and a feel for where they're at. But that's usually in the discovery phase where we determine, okay, they're in this bucket. Let's really highlight and emphasize these benefits. They're still going to get all these other ones, but these are the ones that they care about most.
Okay. So tell me, I mean, this segues perfectly into a little bit more of your background. And tell me about Amplafy Media, about your agency, for the watchers and listeners to get context on what you do.
Yeah, we are a podcast production company, and we do, full service podcast production, video, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the whole thing. And we got started back in about 2017 was when we worked with our first podcast, doing the marketing for it. I had someone reach out to me, and they said, "Hey, Instagram just is allowing video." It was right when Instagram turned on video, and they said, "Hey, I want to clip up my podcast and put that on Instagram. Can you do that for me?" Seems really simple today, but it was like very groundbreaking back then because they didn't have all the tools. And so we would add the captions and we would clip up the stuff. And what we would do is we would, really grow this podcast through social media and content and kind of what people call repurposing content today. That really wasn't a thing or like a name back then. It was just, kind of this fringe service that we did after. Also, I had a website and design agency with my partner at the time. We had a Facebook ad agency for real estate agents. And I mean, I tried everything under the sun to figure out how to make, money in this online space.
Right.
And for me, I tend to be drawn into the service-based business. I'm like, people want to pay me for something that I can do. I'm like, sure, I'll do it for you. And you kind of run with that. And so that's kind of what we did. And when going back to the podcast thing, we figured out that if we wanted to actually grow the podcast more, we had to improve it. And that at first started off with improving the audio and doing the editing. And so we took over a lot of the production. But then we also realized that most people who have podcasts, that's not their main core business. And so not that they don't know what they're doing, but they're a lot of times doing it for their first time, or they're just kind of venturing it on their own. And so we find that helping them with the show development and helping them with how to be a better, host, and how to host in a way that actually drives business and revenue and creates partnerships and collaborations and all these sorts of things that we want out of podcasts, as opposed to what I've seen so often with people who have shows, even for a number of years, is they look up and they go like, I don't know why I'm doing the show. I know I should be doing the show, but I can't actually connect the dots between why I'm doing the podcast and how it's helping my business. And so we kind of come in and bridge that gap and kind of help them to, create the systems that actually, sustain, and you can drive. Now you can actually reliably drive business, through your podcast.
So that path is actually looking really enticing for our conversation here. I feel like a lot of the watchers and listeners might be in a similar situation. There's certainly in the agency space a lot of podcasts, and we see it. I think it's often seen as a way to build new relationships, make new connections. But the snag a lot of people hit is how to actually either tie it to revenue. Attribution is an issue, but also like how to run it. You mentioned something really interesting, like how to run it in a way that actually, I mean, being blunt, makes money. Can you lift the veil on that a little bit? I know you also did some writing about that. Like, what are the techniques here?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying that we used to focus a lot on getting more downloads, getting in the charts, getting in the rankings, these vanity kind of sexy metrics, because early on, that's what people wanted. They said, hey, we want to grow our show. I'm like, hey, okay, what does that mean? We get more downloads. Okay, cool. And so we're going up 1,000 more downloads a week. Okay, we look up and we've doubled the number of downloads for a show. We've done this number of times. And then we look at, and they go, but it's not actually creating any more money. It's not actually creating any more revenue for like the business. And so we knew that there was a break, there was a gap kind of missing. And so that over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, that's been our mission to try to figure out what that is. And so that's all to say that downloads they don't determine revenue, right? I think that that's something that people have to throw away. I mean, we have shows that have generated, it's been out for 3 or 4 months and has already generated multiple 6 figures in revenue and contracts.
Wow.
And there's only about 150 people. No, I think they just crossed like 500 unique listeners, but there's about 100 or 150 people listening a week. Now, this industry, though, isn't an industry. It's in the kind of cybersecurity field. And so they're working with huge, I don't want to say huge, but large Fortune 1000, Fortune 5000 companies that are signing these larger contracts. But there's not a lot of those people in the country. There's maybe only a few thousand of those decision makers in the entire country. So you're not going to have a massive, groundbreaking, chart-breaking show,
right?
But they have enough of the right sort of people listening, and their sales cycle went from, they would be working people for years. Like it was like a 2-year sales cycle, and they were. We got a call because they were surprised or confused. They're like, people just called us, and within a couple of weeks we signed these contracts, and like they said we don't know what's going on. We're like, we know exactly what's going on,
right?
But it's those sorts of things where if you do it the right way, you can sort of tie it back not to a download. And it's often the challenge coming from the internet marketing space is it oftentimes can't be tied to a click, or there's no way to trace it through the funnel like so many internet marketers love to do, where they say we got them here, they went through this phase, they came to this page and site, and you can really track that funnel. Unfortunately, the technology, I mean, it may be getting there, but it's just not there to be able to do it. But also that they essentially the downloads they're not indicative of revenue. So that's not what we focus on.
Okay.
So the other side of it, though, is we have, I guess, 3 paths that we really focus on. The first is let's just call it the sales development path. What's nice about having a podcast is it can get you in the door with people that you are very unlikely to get in your foot in the door with. I have a buddy who is a loan officer, and their entire business model is asking realtors to get coffee with them. That's their entire business model, is reaching out and calling a realtor and asking, hey, do you want to get coffee? Because if we can connect over 15 minutes, I might be able to develop a relationship with you. You'll like me, and then you'll send me business because we like each other.
How interesting.
And so they will schedule and they will drive how many coffee connections they can have in a week, because they know if they have 10 coffee dates with realtors, they're going to get 2 referrals from those realtors, and they do that every single week. They know that their pipeline is going to get filled up, and that's essentially their sales process. Well, the problem with that is that asking someone to get coffee with you is like, that's a very high ask. Like, at least for me, and I'm sure for you, Kuba, you've got a child or children. I'm not, and you're a father.
Yeah.
You have a job, you have a life, you have all these things, and you just want me to. There's this random person that just.
But you're
wants
talking
to
about like
go
a physical
coffee
in physical space. That is a hard ask. Yeah.
That's a hard ask, right? And so, and I'm sure a lot of these, loan officers and realtors are doing these over Zoom, but essentially that's what they would do, is they would go and they would sit in a coffee place, and they would just have people coming in, and sitting down, and they'd have these coffee connections. And that's how they drive their pipeline. That's how they drive their leads and their referrals and such. Well, going back to the tall ask, if you can all of a sudden, instead of saying, hey, can you go to coffee? If you can instead say, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? All of a sudden, I mean, we've seen numbers and opt-in rates go from something like 5% to like 70%.
Okay.
Meaning that 1 out of 20 people will go and get coffee with you. Whereas we found that about 70% of people, if you do the right way, that you ask to come on your show, will come on your show. Because most of the time in these...
You're saying right way.
Yeah,
so I was. Can you unveil a little bit of that? Like, I assume you do a lot of pitching, right? So what's the secret there?
So back in my first job out of high school, I mentioned I was in sales, and we found that, like, for me, like, it was all about numbers, right? In the sense of you can track your numbers, and for me, my daily goal was to make 32 phone calls a day, because
Wow.
I knew if I made 32 phone calls, on average, it would take about 16 phone calls to schedule an appointment. So if I made 32 phone calls a day on average, 7 days a week, that means that I would have 14 appointments. If I had 14 appointments, I'd probably sell on 10 of them. If I sold on 10 of them, I would, make X amount of dollars. So that was the numbers that I would be driving,
I
right?
see.
And so going back to that same thing, for someone who is in a sales sort of world, and a lot of times these kinds of things are commodity. And I don't want to say they're commoditized services. Think about a loan officer, a realtor, a lawyer, an accountant. These types of people where they are, the service is essentially the same. The differentiator is the individual, their
Right.
expertise, their perspective,
Right.
their, like, the experience, that sort of thing, the trust factor, right? And so that's what we found, is that if you can get your foot in the door with more people in those types of industries, it's likely to lead to more business, because they've already have the downstream sort of processes in place
Mm.
to turn that into revenue. And so back to that example, if it took me 16 people to drive, an appointment, or if I had to do 16 touches or 16 actions, whatever it is, that's, I don't know what the percentage is, right? 7-8%, something like that.
Yeah.
Or whatever that may be, whatever that number is. Well, all of a sudden, what we found is that when instead of asking someone for a sales appointment, if you're asking someone, or an intro call, if you're asking someone to come on your podcast, we found the numbers to be up to 70% in terms of people that are
Right.
saying yes to that. Right.
Okay.
And that 30% might just be because those people didn't actually see the email. So it could, of the people who are actually, open to it, it's actually much higher, because when you offer the opportunity to come on a podcast, it's much less of an ask. It's actually a give. You're giving them publicity. You're giving them, potentially content. You're giving them backlinks. You're giving them all of these resources.
Yeah.
And all someone usually has to do is just, show up, maybe even not even to a physical place, but like we're doing now, they can even do it remotely.
Yeah. It's
And
also,
so that's what we found is,
what I find useful when I'm a guest on podcasts is, like, it's an opportunity for me to build my POV, even discover, what my take is on certain things. Like, I come with certain experience, I come with a point of view on things, but then I get a question that maybe I didn't expect, or didn't think deeply about before, and all of a sudden I discovered, kind of more that I can give, and that is a very useful exercise. And this kind of podcast context makes it really rewarding to do something like that. Let me hit you with another question then, if I may. We are, like, right now we're looking at kind of the beginning of this whole flow, right? You're reaching out to people. I understand that it's a much higher conversion rate to, so people are more inclined to agree to be on a podcast. Where
I want to make one thing clear, Kuba.
Sure.
This is one path.
One
We found
path,
that there's
yeah.
like three distinct paths
Mhm.
that can kind of overlap a bit.
Okay.
But this is one path that we deploy for a business that is really trying to drive their pipeline.
Okay.
Right?
So
That's because when you do that, then it's directly traceable to revenue, because you met this person on the podcast, you had a follow-up call with them, they signed the contract. There's the revenue right there, right? It's
Right.
like you can directly trace, oh, I reached out to this person who I would have otherwise not had a connection to. We put them through our sales process. They converted. Now there's trackable revenue. It's not through clicks, or it's not through, like that sort of thing, but at least you can trace the revenue.
So, and I wanted to focus, kind of stay still within the first path, eager to hear about the other two as well. I feel like, at least in my experience, I've done a few of these, right? I think I might have done personally like over 50 episodes right now, or maybe closer to 100 right now. The part that I hit a snag on is usually we stop recording and there's a time to have a conversation kind of off the back of it, feeling good about what we recorded. And that's usually where, you're talking about putting people in the sales process, but I wanted to get some more detail on that. Like, is there a trick, an art to this, where, you actually manage to get from a conversation that's like purely giving them value, featuring them on your platform, on your show, to gently leading them towards, kind of the benefits of what you offer, or like, trying to actually get them, well, bluntly, in the pipeline? Like, what have you found works here?
Yeah, I have to give credit to one of our former partners, Lupus Capistani, because this is his genius. But in that exact thing that you're talking about, we just get people to opt into a training or opt into our funnel. And all we do is we say, I don't know if it would be helpful, but we've got this thing. It's a free training. It's a PDF. It's a walkthrough. It's a demo. It's whatever your lead magnet is. It's a scorecard. It's a whatever. I don't know if it'd be helpful, but we have this thing. You obviously are in the market who would benefit from it. And here's what it does. Would you want to hop on that call? Should I send it over? Would it be helpful for me to send it over? Would you like, and that sort of small little thing, because what we don't want to do is we don't want it to be a bait and switch. We don't want it to be a like a timeshare sort of thing.
Right.
So that's why now it's the opportunity to just present value, and then the sales conversation, the sales something happens in a different segment. Even if that segment is, well, hey, do you have 15 minutes right now to just like stick around and I can just demo this thing for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It could be as simple as that, but now it's a different part than the recording, right?
Yeah.
Because you've transitioned. So that's what we found, is at the end to have something helpful, and just in the same way that you would have a landing page and have someone opt in, you just verbally have them opt in, and then you work the sales cycle or the sales funnel just as you normally would.
That's interesting. So basically, within this model, kind of the giving continues. You're positioning it as, something of value, like an individual training, or potentially something.
Well, remember, for these types of people, trust is so important, right? Trust is really, and especially in the agency space, that's what I think most clients are buying is trust. And so, the I had a client tell me recently, they're like, I think they said love. Like, I don't know. They said like, I love knowing that I have a guy, like that I've got a guy for my podcast, right? That like they feel that they can trust. They like, I don't know how it happens. I don't care how it happens, but there's a trust there that it's going to happen. Okay. And trust is only built through time. It's very hard to build trust through any other mode of than time. And that's what's great about having a podcast, because people can listen to it, obviously. But yeah, if you can continue to give value, by the end of it, they're like, a lot of times they're like, how, so what do you do?
Okay.
How do, like, there's so often where that conversation, when you have that, it turns into, so like, tell me what you do. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of a recording, and if you do it sort of the right way, they ask that question on their own. And then it gives you the opportunity to, go into whatever pitch that you have.
Right. Okay. So multiple threads to pull on here, but you left this kind of unclosed loop in my mind where you said there's 3 paths from podcast to revenue. Let's explore the other 2 before I pull on anything else.
So the quick one is just content, right? That's the third path, because if people have a social platforms or a website SEO strategy that they want to drive, it's the best thing for that, because you can repurpose it. It's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's YouTube, shorts. And then what's nice about it is you've also got the SEO content, because now you can take the podcast, you've got the YouTube video, you put it on your blog, you've got ChatGPT, you write a little, blog post underneath it, and it feeds that engine. So that if people have those systems already in place, or they're already leveraging it, it's great, because now you've got real source content, whereas opposed to most SEO, people are just pulling stuff out of their butt, right? Because they're trying to make stuff up.
And about SEO, actually, have you found it relatively easy or relatively hard, or does it depend on the structure of the episode to turn podcasts into SEO? Let me tell you about my experience. What I found often, and maybe this is down to the way I interview people, is we touch upon, we start a podcast and we touch upon like 2, 3, maybe 4 kind of topics within that podcast. So we talk a little bit about business development here, we talk about personal branding here, and we talk about writing as kind of our third thing, right? So this one conversation doesn't easily map to any single SEO keyword. So then, and again, this might come down to the structure of the show, but what have you found to be the easy, the difficult part, or the trick in terms of turning that into SEO content?
Yeah. So the suggestion that comes to mind is when I hear that, I'm like, okay, that's multiple different posts, because the easy, simple thing is you just take your show notes, your podcast, your YouTube player, boom, that's the blog post on its own. And
Right.
just by feeding your domain with more pages, I mean, I'm no SEO expert, but it can just do it in that regard. The second thing, when you're talking about in terms of formatting it for SEO content, I think what's also helpful is taking those individual subtopics and making those individual posts for your blog, right, to
Right.
feed the SEO. And we've, we rely heavily on AI and ChatGPT and things like that, because we'll take the transcript, we'll feed it into ChatGPT, and then we'll kind of massage it a lot. It's not like we're just taking first things out, but we really use ChatGPT to extract and create those sorts
Right.
of drafts for those individual articles. So I think those 4 subtopics are their own article, and then you can take, you can create the clip from the video, put that on the page, and it all kind of juices itself together. So I think that
Okay.
it takes a little more time, but if you're willing to split that episode into multiple posts, you've got a breadth of content there.
Okay. So how I'm understanding what you called, I think, the third path is all the different opportunities you get to repurpose the podcast content, turn it into SEO content, more
So,
traffic converts, and thus revenue, right? So is there a second path in between, or where does that go?
the second one is thought leadership,
Okay.
right? This one is a little bit different it's a little bit longer of a play, but the difference is instead of using the show to directly drive our pipeline or our sales funnel, we're using the show to get in front of businesses, organizations, associations, of people that we would otherwise not be able to get in front of, to get on stages, to get on shows, right? To get in front of, you use it to all of a sudden become the person in an industry. I'll give you an example. We have a show that is a biotech podcast, and they're actually a marketing agency for biotech companies. So they started a show about the biotech industry, and they highlight different companies that are doing cool things in that space. It's actually not really a marketing show. They're just talking about the cool things that are happening in the space. It's really for people in that industry.
Okay.
And so when they go to these conferences or they go to these events, it's not like they're getting mobbed, but like almost, in the sense that people are coming up to them and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I you're the person from this show, right? You're the host of Grow Everything. You're the and they're like, can I take pictures?" Like, people are coming up to them as if they're kind of these mini celebrities. And I was on a call with them the other week, and they're like, "We're so busy at the event that like we didn't have any time to do it," because like people wanted to book meetings with us. People they were like a celebrity
Right.
of the event, because the industry is not, it's not huge, it's not small, but there's not a lot of people who are creating content and media in that way. And so all of a sudden they've used that to speak on stages. They've used that to they've gotten different partnerships with other companies. Another example that comes to mind is that we had a pharmacist who he was a pharmacist coach. He was also a pharmacist, but he was basically a coach for other pharmacists.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
we started the show, and what they're called buyers organizations, but basically all these pharmacists like form coalitions against the insurance companies or the pharmaceutical companies to get better rates or whatever.
Okay.
So there's these associations of thousands of pharmacists that reached out to him, and they're like, "Hey, we're doing this training for our people. We saw you have a show that is talking exactly about what our training needs to be on. Can we pay you all this money to do the training?" And he's like, "Yeah." And and what the cool thing is we were only like 12 episodes in. And so in these, a lot of people think that like things are saturated and like there's a lot of podcasts and yada, yada, and you can look at the stats, and are there a lot of podcasts? Sure. But what I would say is, if someone asked me this the other day, they're like, is it too late for me to get started? And I responded that if you are just coming in and creating a general business show, or a
Right.
general entrepreneurship, or a general marketing, or a general whatever, fitness, like pick it, you name it, and you want to go really broad. I think that it's not too late, but that's much more difficult than if you come in and you say, I serve this industry. Here are the people, or here's the ways in which I serve this industry. And
Right.
here's the types of people in the industry that I serve. Well, now all of a sudden it opens up the opportunity for you to partner and collaborate with everybody else who serves people or different in a different capacity or serves different people in that industry.
Okay.
And so when you really, you hear it all the time, it's cliche, when you niche down, but when you do that, it opens up opportunities, and all of a sudden in a very, in just a few months, you can be like the person in an industry.
So I would love to dig a little bit deeper here. You mentioned shows, like you said, in kind of niche spaces in biotech. I'm thinking of somebody listening to this who's looking at their business and they're thinking, okay, I mean, we're a marketing agency and we don't do anything groundbreaking in terms of like the range of services. We do SEO here, content here, maybe some performance, maybe some brand. It's not, that differentiated yet. And worst of all, we also are not yet specialized in terms of like the niche that we serve. Like, some people are going to admit in front of themselves and in front of the world, like there are other agencies like us, right? There isn't still this unique thing. Is there still a way to have a unique show though, and to be able to break through, even though other marketing agencies are running their shows themselves? Like, what would your advice be here?
My advice would be to still just pick like a niche. Like we looked at when we're trying to figure out how to grow our business development side. We looked at who is our best customers, because we realized that we had we were getting clients, but then some of them were churning, some of them were problem cases, and we were like, who are our best customers? Like, who are the best ones? They stick around forever, no headaches. Like they're
Right.
easy. They like us, we love them. Like, who are those? And we started to look at we started to realize like they fit this group of people, and so we said, okay, let's just start there. Let's pick there. And so we dove into that, and we just made that our niche, because we're like, this is who we want to work with. So we're just going to go and with media, we just said, what do they want to hear? What are they interested in? If I can and if I don't have those answers myself, I can go find those answers. I can go interview people who do have those answers. And so that's what I would say. When I think about the classic example is Hormozy, right? I mean, everybody kind of has seen, Alex Hormozy these days, but the name of his podcast at the beginning was like Gym Launch Secrets or something like that. Like it would just, and then he just changed it.
Right.
And nothing happened. Literally nothing changed. And that's what's nice about a podcast specifically, is you can do however many episodes that you want. And whenever that you want to change it, you can change the name, and you can change the picture, and you can change everything. You keep everything else the same and nothing changes.
Right.
So you just want to pick a new niche. You just pick a new niche.
You gradually expand within the same show. I remember. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point too. To like niche and then expand, right? I think that's something that you can do as well, which is another good idea.
I was meaning to mention that I remember from our spin-off podcast, Agency Breakthrough, I had a chance to co-interview with Gray McKenzie. Our guest was James Carberry from Sweetfish Media, and he also mentioned that like initially his show, interview-based, was all about inviting sales leaders, and only after I think he mentioned over 100 episodes, he realized they should be inviting over marketing leaders instead. And speaking of James Carberry, what he's been putting out on LinkedIn, and what I wanted to confront with you, is a new narrative where he used to do, and Sweetfish used to do a lot of interview-based shows, right? So I want to talk with you about formats for a second. What is your take on interview-based shows versus one popular format that's been kind of on the rise is co-host commentary? You don't have a guest on each show, but you kind of build up the personality of the of the hosts a little bit more. Are you seeing a trend here? Are you seeing what works in certain situations? I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, the obviously I don't want to say the easy, but a simple way to grow your show is to bring on guests and leverage their promotion to grow your show, and that's obviously why a lot of people lean on that. The challenge with that is that if you only bring on guests and you only conduct interviews, and I specifically say interviews specific, like I use that word specifically, then the problem is that you give all that sales equity to your guests. I had someone tell me the other day, they're like, I used to interview people all the time, and then all my audience would come and sign up for my guest lead magnet. They would sign up for
Right.
my guest offer, but no one was coming to me. And I told her it's because you're doing interviews. You're not having a conversation. Because if you're conducting an interview, all of a sudden it subconsciously positions the guest as the expert. And if the guest is the expert, then by default the host is something else.
Kind of a
Is
student,
not.
right?
Right. Which is fine if that's your persona, because there are times where, like, there are some shows that I host where my intro says I come with no answers. Like, I am only here to ask questions because my role is to be kind of alongside the listener, not in front of them in any sort of way, right? Now, if you're listening to this show, it's because you want to guide. You're the guide. You're not in the same seat as your client or your listener, or you're the other, as your client. You're coming at them to lead them in some sort of way, right? And so
Right.
if you're going to do that, what we tell them to do is to instead have conversations. And you do a great job of this, where you inject your perspective and your opinion, and you just add to the conversation, as opposed to a lot of newer hosts. And this sometimes comes from nerves and anxiety and things like that, but they
Right.
just feel the need to ask a question.
Right.
And you don't always have to do that. You can interject and you can add your perspective, and in the same way that you playing tennis, you volley it back to the other person, and by thus you still get to keep what we call the sales equity.
So right now, if you were starting a new show, for a typical client, would you steer them? You're probably going to answer it depends, but then I want to know what it depends on. Would you steer them in the direction of like a co-hosted show, like more of a pick two big brains from your company and comment on the kind of newest events, or would you still go in the direction of guest based? Is it a mix? Like, what would you recommend?
I would say yes and all, because I think if a client is willing to do the solo sort of episodes, 10 to 15 minutes, where they just share their expertise or give some commentary, news updates, like, current events, that sort of thing. I think that's the best way to establish that sales equity, because it's just you and the listener, and they're listening to you for 15 minutes, just
Right.
you, and you can build more sales equity in those 15 minutes than you would get doing an interview for an hour and a half with a guest, right?
Mm.
Now, what we've seen really work, though, specifically with that cybersecurity company, is they have the cast of founders on. Sometimes it's two of the founders, sometimes it's the founder and a guest, sometimes, but it's a good mix of all of that. So that way, we're
Okay.
still able to leverage the networks of the guests for their promotion, but we also mix in quite a few of just two of the founders, and they're able to build that sales equity in the company all on their own. And so if we call it like a cast, because I think of I think of all this like media, and like, my idol is Walt Disney and Ted Turner. And so I'm, like a cast of characters
Okay.
is what we always would that would be ideal, because it gives the listener the opportunity to connect with whoever they relate to most. And that's sometimes challenging with just one person.
Yeah, that's a really cool takeaway. I haven't thought about it this way of like a cast. And what I'm getting from you is a bit of more of a loose and flexible approach. Like, if something makes sense to discuss on a solo episode, let's do a solo episode. If it makes sense to bring on a guest, let's bring on a guest. That makes perfect sense to me. So look, um, I'm thinking, like, in terms of how much time we also have here for today. I wanted to ask you a general question, and one where I'm really curious where you're gonna go with this, because obviously this topic is really broad. There's a lot of details to dig into here. So let me try and cut to the chase, right? With the podcasts that you see right now, kind of that are around there, especially in this niche of the B2B space, the agency space, what is something that you typically see that's like a common mistake, something that that you just wish these podcasts would stop doing, either in terms of the content or the technical aspects of it, or the promotion? Like, what is the pitfall that you see people fall into time and again?
Yeah. Well, the big thing is that interview conversation thing. I
Mm?
mean, that's such a nuanced sort of thing. There's so like I don't even approach that with a client until they're 25, 30 episodes in, because so much of it is just getting past the nerves of being on camera and shit, what do I say? And
Ah,
like I
gotcha.
don't know if we can cuss, sorry. But like that sort of thing. So that conversation is first. The second thing is that if someone is bringing on guests, the next step is to like really create what we call like a great guest experience. And I've made the mistake of not doing that, of just bringing someone on, interviewing them, great, bye, and like not even telling them when their episode's live, just because I'm so busy and doing whatever I'm doing,
Right.
and I'm just so caught up and really, you raise your eyebrows because it's like you see the value of it. Like you know that there's value in there. And for me, it was so early in our process, we were trying to figure out what things moved the needle, what things didn't, what things mattered and what things, perhaps didn't. We realized that was huge, because one of the big things, if you're going to bring on guests, well, they've they've got to share it, or else it doesn't really work. So much of it was like, how do we get our guests to share? And it's like, well, if we let's just go on that spectrum, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's start there and start figuring stuff out. So um we make it really easy for them to share. We write sample, posts for them where they can copy and paste. We provide all like the
Right.
media and assets on a nice Notion page that they can just download and from, because a lot of people will just send a Google Drive link,
Yeah.
and that does not work. We
Yeah.
found that it's, or some people will go through it, but Google Drive is such a pain in the butt to, like, there's just so many steps, it seems. You got to click here, there, download, like, and for some reason we put it all in one sort of promo, we call it a promo page. And that seems to, people really respond to that, and they actually share it because it's easy and it's accessible.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity for people to be more proactive and take kind of more responsibility, because I've also fallen in this mental trap of, okay, I sent the clips and they didn't post them. I guess they're not a very engaged guest, or they don't really care that much. But the reality of it is, if you make it easier for them, then the proportion of people who actually do share just rises dramatically. And it is on you. It is within your control here as well. I wanted to add on top of that, a little tactical thing, kind of my finding, and this goes into larger content strategy, even beyond podcasting. But here's something that I would recommend to anybody listening to this. Like, you're talking about the guest experience, right? One thing that I found in the past to be difficult to untangle is like, okay, I've had somebody on my show once. What do I do now to kind of re-engage them, to keep this as a long-term relationship? Maybe there isn't something to collaborate on right now, but I want to kind of keep them in the loop. What I found is great is kind of to move them from a podcasting strategy to like an event strategy afterwards. So recently for Zenpilot, for example, and this is on our YouTube channel right now if you want to see it, I invited a few of our past podcast guests in the agency space, and I ran an event with them called the AI in Agency Operations Roundtable. And basically told them, okay, you're getting a 13-minute speaker slot. It's not an interview. You get to present what you want. I know you've got great insights. Kind of come again to our platform in a different way for a different topic. And it was a big success on our end. So like, just wanted to add that in case, like, because it really meshes with what you were talking about here today. As you know, it's one of my favorite tactics. Like, people should be doing that more. And if I was if somebody's listening to this and I was on your podcast and you're running an event, I want to speak. Reach out to me. Okay, that's my plug. Speaking of plugs here, Hector, I wanted to ask you, because we're kind of reaching the end of the time here, unfortunately. Could you tell the watchers and listeners where they can learn more from you, follow you, and kind of see your work?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Hector Santiesteban. I'm not the doctor. So that there's not there's another
There's a
Hector
doctor.
Santiesteban who's a doctor. Yeah, he's
Okay,
an
yeah,
MD, and that's why he wins in Google search, because he has all these MD pages, and it kills me. So I'm
gotcha.
not the doctor.
Okay,
On Instagram, you can find me at Hector_podcast. That has all my and then on both of those, there's a link in there where you can see all my shows. And also, there's a bunch of resources on there for wherever you're at in your podcasting journey. And if anybody wants to hop on what we call a podcast profitability session, I'm happy to hop on, just because so many people, they don't have that blueprint to know, they've got a show or they have a show idea, but they're like, I need to make this make sense, or else
right.
I can't do it. It's gotta have a return to my business, or else it's not worth the time. And so we really help to map that out, so that way they can go do that, or obviously we can, help and support with them as well.
Podcast profitability session. I really love the branding on that. Well done. Kudos. Okay, awesome. So I'll leave the relevant links in the show notes, of course, for our watchers and listeners. And you can go there to learn more from Hector or work with him and his team in terms of agency journey. Don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to rate us on the relevant platforms. All the links are going to be in the description as well. Don't forget to subscribe to Zenpilot on YouTube as well, because we'll be dropping more episodes there, and ClickUp tutorials and agency operations, webinar recordings, and a bunch of other stuff. We try to be generous with our content there today. That's it for our time here today. Unfortunately, Hector, really nice conversation. Learned a lot from it. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was great being here. Thanks, Kuba.
Thanks. Yeah. And to you watchers and listeners, bye-bye, and we'll see you in the next one.